say the game is getting old. Monday morning and your coffee's cold. Life is not what you want.
And welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo. I know every week I say the same thing. I have an amazing show, but it is absolutely amazing. This is an amazing show because I have an amazing guest, Dr. Michael Goldsby. You're going to love him. You're going to love the book. For those of you who will listen to this on a podcast, I know you can't see the book, but I'm holding it up for everybody who's watching me right now live. And it is called Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. Wow. That's all I'm going to tell you. We're going to get with Dr. Goldsby. I promise you we will. But I'm telling you, the book, outstanding, awesome, amazing, cool, insightful. If you have ever thought in your mind that, man, maybe I would like to try this entrepreneur thing, the book's amazing. I'm telling you, it's going to be so insightful for you. But hey, let's do what we do every week, right? Let's check in with you on the 4 areas of your life. You know, I really believe that we are 4-part people. We are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual people. So let's check in where you're at on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being outstanding. Let's talk about you physically. Where are you at right now physically, right? I mean, how are you feeling physically? Are you and what are you doing? Are you eating right? Are you getting a little exercise? Are you doing the things that you need to do to be healthy? Are you getting your checkups, right? Those type of things, right? Are you doing all those type of things? You putting the fork down? You keeping your hand out of the bag of chips? Right? Putting down the sodas, right? How are you on that scale of 1 to 10? 1 being awful, 10 being outstanding. How are you doing right now? Right? Okay, you got that number? Now, whatever that number is, how are you going to get to the next number? So if you're a 3, how are you going to get to a 4? If you're a 7, how do you get to an 8? And how can you start on that journey right now? What can you do to start on that journey right now? Okay? All right, cool. Now, secondly, let's talk about the mental side, right? What are you at in that same scale, 1 to 10, 1 miserable, 10 outstanding? Where are you at mentally? What do I mean by that? Well, for those of you who have never joined us before, what I mean mentally is, what are you feeding your brain? You know, our brain is 2 halves. We have a right side and a left side, and I'm gonna get a little geeky here. We have this thing called a corpus callosum that kind of keeps those things together so they kind of communicate with each other. But that right side is our creative side. That left side is our logical side. You can think of it, for those Trekkies out there, if there still exists, that's kind of like your Mr. Spock brain. They're on the left side. So my question is, what are you doing to feed both sides of your brain? How are you growing in your mental activity? What are you reading? What are you consuming? What is your brain ultimately consuming over the course of your day or the course of your week, right? I mean, this show is a great show because, right, I interview authors who write nonfiction, and you're going to find that Dr. Michael Goldsby has a tremendous sense of humor, and he's just an outstanding guy. He's going to be fun, and he's going to feed both sides of your brain. Yeah, probably be a little bit more left brain, but I promise you it's going to be right brain too. But what are you feeding yourself? What are you listening to? What are you reading, right? You got that number? We got 2 numbers, right? So third, where are you at emotionally on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being outstanding? How would you say you're doing emotionally? And what I mean by that, and you'll hear the words like emotional intelligence or the emotional quotient being thrown around, but what I really mean is, how well are you able to really control your emotions when, like, the little things get to us? How well are you able to overcome, situations where you want to get emotionally but upset, or, emotionally out of control, but somehow you're able to keep yourself under control? How are you able to do that? Right? And in addition to that part of that emotion is, how well are you able to relate to the emotions of others, right? Because that's all part of emotional intelligence and your emotional quotient. Isn't how well you control your emotions, but how well are you able to tune into the emotions of others? You're going to find that in today's talk with Dr. Michael Goldsby, as we talked about entrepreneurship the Disney way, that Disney was a genius at being able to tap into the emotions of others and being able to understand the human from an emotional standpoint. It's so important to success. So you got that number, right? Okay, you got your emotional number. So you got your physical, mental, emotional number, right? What are you going to do? You can do things right now to probably change that, right? And by the way, emotions, it's all about intention. If you are intentional, you can control your emotions. I promise you can. And then finally, the 4th level, and that is, where are you at spiritually on a scale of 1 to 10? And what I mean by spiritually, the fact of the matter is, we all kind of have a belief system that we believe in something, right? And I know I can hear the scientists. Look, I was raised in science, okay? I can hear the scientists go, well, there is no such thing as the spiritual. I promise you, science cannot explain everything, all right, A. And then B, I want to tell you, you believe in something. You absolutely do. You have faith in something outside of yourself, right? You have to. If you didn't, you wouldn't live. So maybe you believe in karma, maybe you believe in nature, maybe you believe in God, whatever that may be. What gives you that center peace and puts you at rest? Whatever that may be, how are you doing in those areas? Because if you neglect it, it's going to fall apart just like everything else will. Right. So if it is God is how you are centered up, well, I just ask you, how is that relationship going? And if it's nature, how's that going? Are you centered, or is it karma? You know, how's that happening for you? Whatever the case to be. Now you've got 4 numbers. Okay. And think of the 4 numbers as the legs of a table. And you're sitting in a normal height chair, and you're trying to eat off a table with these 4 legs that may be uneven or too low. And when that happens, it makes it very difficult to eat off the table, right? So the goal here is to bring up all 4 of your legs and get them at the right height so that you eat well. And that brings me to my next guest, and I am so thoroughly excited. His name is Michael Goldsby. And let me just say this. Michael Goldsby is actually Dr. Michael Goldsby. He's going to allow me to call him Michael. Maybe he'll even let me call him Mike. But he is the Chief Entrepreneurship Officer and Executive Director of the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Free Enterprise, the Stoops Distinguished Professor of Entrepreneurship, Professor of Management, and Director Emeritus of the Entrepreneurship Center and Program at Ball State University. I have practiced that, I'm going to tell you, over and over and over again, and I still stumbled over it. And so he teaches creativity, innovation, and design in the university's nationally ranked undergraduate and graduate programs in entrepreneurship. Ball State University Entrepreneurs Program and Center earned national rankings under his leadership, including top 20 in Business Week, Success and Entrepreneur magazines, and top 10 in U.S. News and World Report's elite ranking. Dr. Goldsby has produced 35 referee journal articles, which, by the way, is extraordinarily impressive. He is also the co-author of several books, this one not outstanding. And also, let me just tell you this. He's got his own website. It's called MikeGoldsby.com. And you can, by the way, join. I'm not making this up. You know what? You can join the Goldsby team, right? If you've got it in you, you can be part of the Goldsby team. He's a podcaster. He's an author. He's written this incredible book. And so please, everyone, welcome to the show, Dr. Mike Goldsby. Michael Goldsby, welcome to A New Direction.
Thank you, Jay. It's good to be here.
So, you know what? I would be remiss if I don't do what I always do, right? So special thanks. Dr. Goldsby is being sponsored today by Inline Business Brokers and Advisors, and they are internationally known business brokerage. So if you are going to sell a business or if you're looking to buy a business, do not hesitate. Do not call anyone else. Call the folks at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can get more information by going to Inline, ENLIGN.com. He's also sponsored by Linda Craft and Team Realtors. No matter where you're at in the world, if you're looking to sell or buy real estate, stop. Look for the people who are the experts in their field for over 30 plus years and have been providing excellence and legendary customer service. Contact Linda Craft and her team. You just go to Linda Craft, LINDACRAFT.com. And also today's t-shirt shout out of the week goes to Holt Physical Therapy. When you're looking to, you know what? They get you back in the game, man. And that's the shirt. They gave me the extra large shirt. I'm so happy to have them as today's t-shirt shout out. So can I call you Mike?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. That makes it so much easier on me. So the book, Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. I found this book to be amazingly inspiring, intriguing. It as a business coach, I also found it to be incredibly insightful and helpful. And I could already see that I'm going to be implementing several things I learned from your book for my clients. But one of the things I want to ask you about is when you were doing the research on Walt Disney, what surprised you most about him?
Well, what surprised me the most was that he went through some very, very hard times over the years building that business. And I did not realize how hard his life was not just his childhood, but his whole life until doing the research for the book.
Do you find that you've done so much work on entrepreneurship and I know you've done so much research on it. Do you find that to be a commonality of successful entrepreneurs, that they typically all have some sort of hardship, or was this unique to him as an entrepreneur?
I think it's pretty common, and maybe there's a correlation there that being able to handle hard things in life prepares you to handle hard things in business. And so there's a lot of people that are, work for the entrepreneurs, the implementers, the people that like the steady paycheck. But Walt said, one of his famous statements was, he thought it was very good to experience a failure when you're young because it prepared you for the challenges you'll have later as a business person.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm coaching business, author, speaker, right? Run my own business, and I'm kind of a solo act. Good or bad, I am. What I found interesting about this book, and was actually so encouraging to me, was that so often when I was going through struggles and I will go through more. I mean, it's just the nature of what happens, I think, whenever you're out on your own. But it was so encouraging me, and you just encouraged me more to just go, I got to look at these setbacks. I got to look at these difficult times as kind of preparation territory for growth. And I think when I was reading this book, even the points at when he was a child and he was, Elias was not very, he was spanking him regularly, and yet, and then one failure after another, or somebody betrayed him, or whatever it was that happened throughout the course of his life, it never dampened his enthusiasm ever.
Yeah, exactly. I say that one of the lessons I got out of looking at Walt's life is he always found the upside in these situations. So there was a famous story where he lost his original creation, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, to Universal.
Right.
And that was one of the betrayals that happened to him. And he had the opportunity actually to sign a contract to stay with Universal and work for Universal. And he gave that up. But the lesson he learned was he was never going to give up ownership of his properties ever again. And that's how Mickey Mouse happened. If it had not been for that betrayal, the upside is he got Mickey Mouse. And so Walt, through his whole career, whenever one thing would happen, he would endure that and he learned from it. And those were things that probably were the major components that propelled him to the next stage of his career.
Michael, do you think, first of all, what you did, by the way, the book's called Entrepreneurship the Disney Way, absolutely fabulous book, insightful read about Walt Disney, and then of course the Disney properties from there on. And we're talking with Dr. Michael Goldsby. Michael, did you fall in love with the man, or did like I did? I mean, I fell in love with the man just based on what you wrote, right? I know there's a lot more than what you wrote here in the first portion of this book, but did you fall in love with the man like I did?
Totally. And I was already, you write the book because you're interested in him from the myth of who he is and the legend, and all the things that the Walt Disney Company became. So there, when I started writing the book, the reason I was drawn to it was I'm an entrepreneurship professor who is also a creativity expert, and I've never found a better combination of creativity and business than Walt Disney, and then later the company that he built. And so, yes, that drew me to it. But then you're right. I did fall in love with him more as I learned about his story because, as I said before, the things that he endured. I mean, you talked about your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. He was tested in all those areas. And something that people don't realize is he had some real hardships. Things, for example, like he had a neck injury that he got from polo when he was in his early 30s. So he had physical pain his entire life from that. The rest of his life, he was in physical pain. He got treated for it every day. Emotionally, spiritually, he and his brother Roy, when they found success, bought their mom and dad a new house. So they got him did a nice thing that boys do. They bought their mom and dad a house. But that house had a gas leak in the furnace that ended up suffocating and killing his mom. He was sort of responsible, not, intentionally, for the death of his mom. I mean, these things that he must have carried with him as he kept moving forward in the business, I was even more impressed with what he accomplished after I learned about some of those things that he faced just in his life.
Yeah, I found every story that you told here, whether it was about his mom and the gas leak that he felt totally responsible for, or I even felt like when they went on strike, right? And here were these people that he just believed wholeheartedly that they would always be loyal to him. And when the strike occurred, it hurt him so deeply. And I think this was one of the lessons that you bring out of this but it forced him to change, which was actually probably a good thing. But he put the pictures on, you tell the story that he put the pictures on the wall.
He did. Not only did he put the pictures, he put the pictures life size.
Yes.
So he had a huge wall with photos of the people that were striking, and he never forgot that. He looked at their faces, and he did hold grudges, and a lot of those people were later out of the studio. There weren't that many, maybe just a handful that stayed after the strike that were out there on the strike line. And you know what, Walt, he took that very personally, because Walt really didn't have a fortune until near the end of his life, because every time he made money, he put it back into the business. And in fact, a lot of times the employees were making more money than he was, because he was paying some of the best animators higher salaries than he was taking.
Right.
And he thought, my gosh, if I, at the time, he built this tremendous, ahead of its time campus, the Burbank studios they still use. I mean, it was truly groundbreaking what he did to provide a place that would be a worker's paradise. And he thought, here I am providing all this for the people that work here. I'm risking everything I have. All they have to do is put in their time and get a paycheck. And he just felt personally betrayed because he had done everything he thought he could to build a good company for them and a good place to work. And there's sort of a BS and AS for Walt Disney. There's a before strike and an after strike.
Right.
And after strike really did change him. And in a lot of ways, it may have done some good for the company, because it made him sort of separate himself more from the people. So there's these famous stories that later at the studio, Walt would not tell you if you were doing a good job. You might hear it from somebody else that Walt said you were doing a good job, but Walt would not tell you directly. And a lot of people criticize him for that. And I think that was a direct result of the strike. I think that before the strike, there were people thinking that he was giving favoritism to some of the people who had been there a while. And then the company was growing, new people came in, and they didn't have the same relationship. So I think Walt, to a certain degree, said, I can't be quite as close to people. There might be favoritism that people will see. People will read things into it. And so he became more of an executive. He was still a creative person. You know, he's still the original Imagineer. But he became more of an executive after the strike than before. It was more of a kind of a lab for experimentation, and everybody was in on the same mission. But afterwards, it became more the Disney company, Walt Disney as the head of the company, and he changed as a person. That really hit him deep.
We're talking with Dr. Michael Goldsby. He's going to let me call him Mike. That's pretty awesome. That's what he's going to let me do. The book is entitled Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. So I took inside the book, actually, page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. You have the entrepreneurial leadership instrument, and it doesn't tell you how strong you are, but it kind of lets you know kind of where you're at in that entrepreneurial leadership scale. And there's kind of four areas that you talk about: the artistic, and then we move to the scientist, to the builder, to the evangelist. At least that's how Walt did it. And I took mine. I did it because I wanted to see where I'm at, and I fall more in line with that. And I think you and I maybe share similar profiles. I fall more in line with that artistic scientist side.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I do, more so than I do the builder evangelist side. And so my egg is a little skewed right towards that end.
Sure.
So, and then you walk us, of course, through this with Walt, but talk to us a little bit about this entrepreneurial leadership instrument, because I really do believe that people take the book and take the instrument. I think it would be really helpful to see where you're at. So talk to us about the instrument and what it's designed to do, and how you came up with these 4 areas of leadership, entrepreneurial leadership.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. There's a common question you get asked when you're an entrepreneurship scholar, and that is, so what is an entrepreneur? There's this entrepreneurial personality. Is there a certain type of person that's an entrepreneur? In my experiences has been that you find all different types of entrepreneurs. But what I did was, and you'll appreciate this, given that you're a psychology scientist, I thought, okay, first of all, entrepreneurship is about opportunity. So then it becomes how you think about opportunity and how you act on opportunity. So I came up with a one side of a grid where you maybe think about opportunity more abstractly in big ideas, or maybe you're more a concrete thinker where you get into the details. And then I thought, okay, well, then how do you act on it? And we know that there are people who like to explore ideas, and then there's people who like to capitalize on the ideas or exploit them. And so by doing that, I came up with 4 quadrants. And so you would have the artist who's into the big ideas, but also likes to explore a lot of things. And that was the artist. And then the scientist is more into the technology and the concrete and the reality of the world and want to understand the world, but yet they explore. So those are scientists. Builders are concrete people. They're really into details, but they do it on a bigger scale. And then evangelists are those people who have big ideas that they do on a big scale, trying to get others on board with the mission. And so what I found is I've given this to a lot of people, and you can find it in the book. We also have a website, www.elprofile.com, where it's there as well, and we explain the profile in more depth. With that profile, we've given it to a lot of people, and it has been very, at least by face validity, by the people who've taken it, they've said, yes, this describes me very well. And more importantly, it helps me see where other people in my organization fit. And I know that I've got a friend out in Silicon Valley who's a venture capitalist using it with building teams out there, his entrepreneurial teams, to say, do we need an artist right now? Do we need a scientist? Do we need a builder? Do we need an evangelist? And with Walt Disney, the story of the book, the first half of the book, is showing how Walt was able to build that company by passing through all 4 stages, right, and then bringing others on board in those areas to build up a really great company.
Yeah. By the way, we're talking with Michael Goldsby, co-author, I should say. I don't want to take Rob and kind of throw him under the bus here because, but Michael Goldsby and Rob Matthews co-wrote this book called Entrepreneurship: The Disney Way. It's really 2 books in one. Is it fair that I can say that? Can I say
yes,
that?
Yes, you can. It definitely is.
Because it's really 2 books in one. The first half of the book is really lessons from Walt's life and how they apply to entrepreneurship. And Michael does a beautiful job walking you through the lessons from Walt Disney's life. And then Rob Matthews comes in and takes his real life experiences and his observations and certainly his research, and then is applying it to the Disney post-Walt era. And so it's really having the complete Disney experience and why they're so successful and the trials and travails that they went through in their success. And by the way, he Dr. Goldsby, Mike, and Entrepreneurship: The Disney Way is brought to you by Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. And I want to just say this about those folks. They have been the sponsor from the very beginning of this show, and I am so grateful for them. They took a risk on me. I evangelized, and they took this is an internationally known business brokerage and advisory company that took a risk on me doing the show, and I am very grateful to them. They have literally helped thousands of people in the sale and purchase of businesses. So when it's time to sell your business, why not contact the internationally known professionals at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors? You can learn more at Inline, ENLIGN.com. And we're also brought to you today by Linda Craft and Team Realtors. Wherever you're at in the world, they can help you either find the right person, or if you're locally in the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle Park area, they will help you find the home for you and help you sell your home. They have legendary customer service, which is what Walt Disney was all about, and they are sponsoring today's show. Just go to lindacraft.com. So when you were talking about Walt, and I'm pulling all these lessons out of there, and as we walk through his artistry, let's just kind of take this little sweet journey. he walks through his artistry. Initially, we see it as a child and his fascination and wonderment and his drawing and his fascination with Charlie Chaplin he acted, and even later in his life he acted out all the parts of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which of course became his masterpiece. I would say original masterpiece. Is it important that every entrepreneur have at least some artistry, or do they already have it?
I think it helps. I mean, I think the thing about knowing your profile is that it tells you areas that maybe at least you can have an appreciation more for the people who do those things, or you have an appreciation for what's involved. And not that you have to be the artist, but you can bring artists on and help. I mean, think about what the entrepreneur does. It's like Walt Disney said later in his life. It's kind of like a little bee that, goes from flower to flower, stimulating ideas. And I think being more aware of what artists do, maybe developing a little bit of it in yourself, it's useful because, I mean, the artists are probably the people that understand the human condition better than anybody and then try to express that. And, Walt was better at knowing who his customers were than probably just about any business person in history.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that he was so. Do I still have you, by the way, Michael?
You do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. I thought we lost you there for a second. I was so fascinated by the fact that he just was able to tune in to people so easily, and he knew what people wanted. It seemed like before they even knew what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. So true.
Yeah, I just felt it. And by the way, we're right. I mean, we're still living off of Disney stuff today, some 50 plus years later.
We are, and they still abide by the core principles that he put in place. I mean, they have the philosophy and the approach and what Disney is about hasn't changed since Walt died.
No, I don't think so. I mean, even the times I've gone to Disney World because I live here on the East Coast, I'm like, no, none of that's changed especially after reading your book. All right, so he moves from this artist to the scientist thing, but I think he may be kind of like you and I. This is kind of my opinion. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. But I got the feeling that he was kind of like you and I, really, an artist scientist, because I love technology. I am so into technology, and I am an early adopter. I am the guy who is like, let's buy it and let's see what happens, right? Let's see how we can use this, right? I still have my Google Glass. To this day, I was an early adopter of Google Glass. And to this day, Michael, I'm still going, you know what? I think I got an idea how to make this thing still work, right?
Excellent.
Right?
Yeah.
But he loved the technology. Matter of fact, the animatronics that he developed, was probably in the late 30s, early 40s, I guess.
Maybe animatronics, probably a little bit later than that, but yeah, he developed those.
Right? Are still amazing.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
So here he is, the scientist embracing technology. Talk to us about why embracing that can inhibit you, why not embracing that could inhibit you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, the thing about Walt was, I think first and foremost, is he liked to learn. He was curious. That's what drove him. And I think each project was just a chance to learn and develop things and create. So he was very much an artist and a scientist by the way he lived. And what was so cool about him is he had an appreciation, a real love for those things. He would actually work in the machine shop with these people, working on ideas. There's a great story when Disneyland was being ready for its opening. Walt was in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea exhibition, spray painting the walls the night before with the construction workers. He loved it. He loved to get his hands dirty. He loved to get in there and do things. And I think once Walt accomplished something, it was always going to be what's next. I mean, he just could not stay with what he had accomplished. He wanted to learn and go into the next place. And then he would leave other people to manage those things. He was not going to be the person running the day-to-day operations. He was always going to be looking at what the next challenge was, that all this fame and resources could be used towards his next big dream.
Yeah, it was amazing to me to watch him embrace this. I was telling my wife that, when he built the Burbank campus, I said, we get all caught up into, oh, we got these cool little campuses now we call HQ, or, insert name here, where people can get away from their job and they can go grab a beer, or they can go play ping pong, or they can go. I said, Walt Disney was doing this in the 30s.
He was, yes.
I said he had underground tunnels. You were writing about this. I'm not saying anything I know. This is from your book. This is from the book, by the way. I'm quoting stuff from the book that Michael wrote, by the way. I'm just letting you know. I'm not that smart, okay? Understand, I'm not that smart. It's just that I read the entire book over and over again. It's just a great read. So really, buy the book, Entrepreneurship, The Disney Way. Fabulous read, really insightful. But one of the things that I found was that he built the tunnel system, which of course would later be in, Disney World, of course, would have, has this amazing underground city, basically. But he built the tunnel system so he could protect, right, the proofs of, of concepts, right, so that they wouldn't get wet if it rained or anything else, right? I mean,
exactly.
He was thinking, and he was thinking so forward about his employees, and I think he was thinking so forward about it, and this is where he starts to build, right? He starts to become a little bit of a builder.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the studio was a huge building project, and I think that, and in a way, even Snow White was sort of a building project, because it was taking everything he had learned from Mickey Mouse and the Silly Symphonies, which were masterpiece cartoons, right, and all the technology that made those so wonderful. And he scaled that up, and then it was a huge hit. And then he said, with that money, the money that came from Snow White was used to build that campus. And I think it's at that point where he goes from being a kind of a really popular kids business to being a true media empire type of business. I mean, because as I said, that campus is still used today as company headquarters.
Right. Yeah. And I want to jump and throw this in here too, so that people realize, because you alluded to it, we just didn't go off on that rabbit trail, and here it comes. So Oswald the Rabbit, pun intended. Okay, do you see what I did there, folks? I did rabbit trail and then walked right into Oswald the Rabbit. Okay, you can laugh at that later. For those of you who are listening, giggle. Okay, so Oswald the Rabbit was actually the first, really the first big creation. And of course, it was taken away by a guy from New York City whose name escapes me, Mitter or something like that, and Universal Studios. Which, by the way, I found the irony in this is that Oswald the Rabbit we never talk about, but Bugs Bunny and Warner is huge to this day. I just want to throw that out. Sometimes karma actually comes back to kill you, okay? Because they could have had Bugs, they took Oswald. Bad choice, okay? And you took Oswald from Walt, but thankfully we got Mickey Mouse out of the deal. What I want to say, though, is as I'm reading, I wanted to go back and watch those Silly Symphonies. And I started with you can go to YouTube, people. You can go to YouTube, just read this book, and Michael will take you through the succession here. I went to YouTube to watch the Silly Symphonies and how they improved. Each one, you talk about this, that he talks about improving the improvement.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's part of that building block thing that he was doing, always improving the improvement. And the Silly Symphonies got so good. The Ghosts one was absolutely, I'd forgotten. I know I've seen it probably when I was a kid at some point, but they're phenomenal. They still are relevant, and they're still really good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But this is all part of the building process for him until we get to Snow White. And that Snow White thing is a huge deal. Why?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely huge. Well, as you said, one, what they learned in the Silly Symphonies, that was sort of his laboratory where he was taking. So think about this. We talked earlier about the artist. Well, he was working in the art of animation, but then it was really going into that science mode with the Silly Symphonies, where they were bringing technology in to make animation more than just moving cartoon characters, but actually serious works of art, but due to the technologies that were developed, like the multiplane camera,
Right.
and also using color. First cartoons used Technicolor. And I think more than anything, even using music to set the tone
Right.
was a real advancement. So when he had sort of learned all he could know from the science of animation that they created with Silly Symphonies, there was a point where he had been kicking around this idea for Snow White for years. And that's the thing about Walt. Sometimes he had these flashes of insight, but sometimes he would mull an idea for years. And then he would say, okay, it's time. It's time. We're ready to do this. And once he decided it was time to do something, he was all in.
Yeah, I found that part fascinating too. This entrepreneurship that we learned from Walt Disney was, and Rob talks about this later in the book, and that is, we have to sometimes have patience with our ideas. We're not necessarily going to, sometimes we rush too quickly into an idea, and Walt was really willing to ruminate because he wanted everything excellent. And I can fall into this trap. I don't know about you, Michael, maybe you do as well. But sometimes I can fall into this trap of wanting something to be so excellent it never gets produced. And you alluded to that about Walt, that his brother actually had to tell him, Walt, it's good enough.
Exactly. There's a wonderful story about that with Snow White. Snow White, again, probably the masterpiece of animation of all time. And I agree with you. It's probably the company's biggest success. And it was getting close to release time, and they were working on it all the way up to the end. And there's a scene in there, if you watch the very end, the last few minutes, where the prince is walking down to kiss Snow White. And there's just a slight second where the prince, he shimmies. He makes it kind of jumps a little bit. And Walt says, Roy, give me 2 weeks. He said, this thing has to be perfect. I need to fix that. And Roy said, we got to release on time. Let the prince shimmy. And I kind of think, I always use that in my own mind. As you said, we as perfectionists are pursuing excellence. Sometimes we have to let the prince shimmy. Sometimes we got to say it's really good. It's excellent. It's good enough. We got to get it out there. It's finding that balance of execution. And that's what Roy was so good at. Roy was really that execution side of keeping the reality to the ideas, which still goes on at Disney. You still have Team Disney, these really solid, savvy business people working with the Imagineers and the animators to make sure that the stories are top notch, the productions are wonderful, but they also still make money. And both things have to happen. And one of my friends down at the company, one of the executives, he told me the thing they live by still today, and what keeps that company relevant so many years later, is that Walt set the example of taking big risk, but always backing it up with quality. And I just found that fascinating, that they know that there were times in the history of the company that they could have gone under, and they always made it through because Walt made sure there was quality in those products.
We're talking with Dr. Michael Goldsby, co-author with Rob Matthews, Entrepreneurship: The Disney Way. The book is a fascinating journey, not into just simply the life of Walt Disney and how he was such an entrepreneur that moved from artist to scientist to builder to evangelist, but also the keys to business success. It would be remiss if I didn't talk about the success formula that you pull out of this book, because I think people are always looking, how do I become successful? Because we all want to be successful. Who doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that this book does is I'm not saying it's a recipe, but it's about as darn close to a recipe as you're going to ever get when it comes to entrepreneurship and success. And which is interesting because I think, I've heard it said, I don't know who said this, but, everybody thinks, somebody like Walt Disney is an overnight success, but it took him, 20 years to get there. So,
exactly,
to become that overnight success. And the fact of the matter is that it didn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen overnight for us. And there are going to be, I think the beautiful thing that you portray in this book, Michael, is that It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be difficult. And you say this, I think you said this in one part of the book. You said, for most people, they would quit. They would say, you know what, it's enough. But for Walt Disney, there was more to do. And my favorite, the favorite theme that came out of this book for me was Walt's always going, what's next?
Exactly. I wanted to really get that across because as I studied his life and I laid out the history of Walt Disney and the biography side, it just came to me that had to be what was always going through his mind. As soon as he saw it built, as soon as he saw it happen, he enjoyed the first moments of success. But I guarantee you that very night something was completed, he always had to think, what's next? He liked the challenges. He was creative. And again, I think that artist, scientist, builder, evangelist appreciation he had made it possible. He realized that those were the things he had to do to make his dreams a reality. And so the scale, the size, the risk, there was only one Walt Disney. But, the thing is, we can all learn. All of us can learn from how he did that.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I think this is the message that at least I pulled out for me personally when you kept emphasizing Walt going, what's next, what's next. It would be so easy for any of us that once we reached a certain level of success to go, okay, I've done enough and I'm looking forward to retirement. But that is not the recipe for success. It is, okay, I've built this, now what can we build? What can we do? How can I help more people? Because everything along the way, to me, at least as I'm reading your writing, suggests all along the way, how can I help more people? How can I build this to help additional people? How can I include more people? How can I reach a wider demographic? Who can I bring in? What other, right? I mean, even when we get to Epcot, his vision for Epcot, it was about how can I make this thing bigger to encompass more people?
That's right. And there's a second aspect of all this too that I know you'll appreciate from the neuroscience is that I think tied with that, the way he kept, when he would think about what's next, he was always looking to the future and he was always using what I like to call aspirational language. He talked about where he was going to take people, where he was going to take the audience, where he was going to take the company, where he was going to take his employees. And when you set this vision out there and you talk about a future that people want to be a part of and they want to be along on that journey, those are the entrepreneurs that really, really take business to the next level, who come up with the really amazing innovations. It's funny, Walt would put people on jobs that they didn't even think they themselves were qualified for. And he'd say, I believe in you. You can figure this out. That's why I'm putting you on this. And he was trying to instill this learning way, modeling this learning all through the company. And it was always about the future. It was always about something great. It was always about the best ideals of human nature and of the human condition. And you're right. He wanted to impact the world. He wanted to impact families, homes, his country. He had a great love for his country. And he always had a foot in the past of honoring what had come before him to make it possible, while still wanting to put his stamp on the world and taking everybody to a future that he thought would be even better.
Yeah, and by the way, we're talking with Michael Goldsby, co-author of the book Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. Fabulous read, just such a comprehensive read on applying back Walt Disney's entrepreneurial principles back to your business, back to your life, back to whatever you're doing. I think it's just an amazingly comprehensive book, and enjoyed reading it all the way. And he's brought to you today by Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. And Inline Business Brokers and Advisors represent profitably held companies with gross annual revenues in excess of $1 million. Inline delivers the highest market value in the shortest amount of time with complete confidentiality. That is their registered trademark. They are internationally known. If you're going to sell a business, you're going to buy a business, don't talk to anyone else. Talk to the folks at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can do that at ENLIGN.com, and Linda Craft and Team Realtors, wherever you're at in the world today, wherever you're listening. And thank you so much. I've got 17 countries around the world who listen and download the show, so I am totally grateful to all the folks in Sweden, India, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and UK. You guys have been amazing, and all the other Ireland and all the other countries, Mayotte, Africa, Guinea, all of you. Thank you for downloading the show. But look, if you're looking to move, I can tell you that Linda Craft and team can help you find your place. They can hook you up with the right person to help you find the home of your dreams. Just go to lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. So, Michael, this whole thing with Walt Disney, this whole big adventure, and I call it adventure because the way you outlined his life, because I mean, you clearly had done your research. There's so many books and things that you read, and I actually have a question. There's somebody who's asking me a question live, and so I don't know if you know the answer, but I'm okay with it. He wants to know, was the Saving Mr. Banks movie, was that related to his life in some way, or is that the way he worked with all authors that Walt encountered, or was just P.L. Travers that way? I guess that's the question. Interesting.
It seemed like they, for the most part, captured P.L. Travers pretty well. They captured the relationship. I love Tom Hanks. I mean, Tom Hanks is a great actor. Right. The only thing about the portrayal of Walt in that movie is I think Walt was a little bit more gruffer. I mean, Tom Hanks is such a likable guy, and that probably maybe a little hard for him to play that type of role. Right. But Walt was a little gruffer. I mean, he was highly stressed. He had physical pains, as I said. He always had the weight of the studio hanging on his shoulder. But you have to keep in mind too that really the only parts of Walt Disney we saw in that movie were his interactions with P.L. Travers. So that might have been how he was in business dealings with others. Maybe Tom Hanks would have shown another side of him if they got him working with the people making Mary Poppins more, or the being at home with his family, things like that. I mean, he was a good family man. Right. But we only got one little piece of Walt Disney there, and to be honest, that's a movie that still hasn't been made. I would love to see a Walt Disney life story, because as you said, his own personal story is as dramatic as the movies he made. Oh my gosh. No, there's no doubt that. And listen, by all accounts, I mean, you talk about that Disney was flawed. He had his flaws. All superheroes generally do, right? He was a chain smoker. Right. He cursed a lot. He didn't always praise his employees, and he could be a little aloof. You know, he was so into whatever the next thing was, he would disappear in his own little world and be creating and working. And so he would oftentimes be aloof. He would often be critical, and he would say, I think you quoted something where he said that you're part of the family. If I didn't chastise you, I didn't care, or something to that extent. He actually said, I wouldn't spank you. Right. Yeah, I wouldn't spank you. That's what it was. Right. I wouldn't spank you. And I thought, well, that's really kind of the identity of the guy. And I'm not sure that, people want to see that part of Walt Disney. I think they want to see him in that classic black and white feature with him interacting with Mickey Mouse. I think is what they want him to see with his, in his light white linen suit, right? And right. That's what I think we all dream of. But he was a pusher. Now, in all that said, though, he didn't care about money. I mean, you make the point that the only time he even thought about money is when he didn't have it. Yeah, exactly. He saw money as simply as a resource to get his projects made. So money was a vehicle, right. And so it was Roy. It was Roy that made sure the money was always taken care of and made sure they got the money they needed. And it was a very interesting team they had there. And that's one of the things I like to point out to people is that. As I point out in the book, it's a phenomenal set of circumstances, the serendipity that when Walt Disney moves out, and this is one of the lessons of the book, you were talking about one of your sponsors about helping people move. Right. You've got to be willing to move to where your best opportunity is. Right. And when Walt Disney moved from Kansas City to Hollywood, I mean, that was at the right time, 1920s, Hollywood just starting to pick up. and his brother is convalescing in a VA hospital out there.
Right.
And since he is sick, he can't work at a bank. So his brother Roy has 8 years of banking experience. If he had not been sick, he probably would have lived with his wife Edna in Kansas City. But he goes to Hollywood to convalesce for his health. And Roy and Walt goes out there on a train because he's flat broke and bankrupt from his previous businesses in Kansas City. And Roy says, "Well, I got nothing else to do. I'll help you build this little cartoon business." And the right timing, the right place, the two right people bringing both their strengths together. Unbelievable. And I always think about this. What if Walt had not boarded that train, or what if Roy had not been sick? I mean, sometimes that's the difference between the people who end up being multi-billionaires, or the people who end up being legends, and people who reach success. We can all reach success. I think we're all capable of success. That legendary success sometimes is just right place, right time, right person, right event. And hopefully you get to find that. You keep plugging along. But that was Walt, right? I mean, Walt did take those moves. He moved to where his opportunity was. He kept plugging along. He kept overcoming adversity, and the things lined up for him. But Roy was a big piece of that.
I have always said that, and I probably didn't originally say it, but I say it. So you know how that goes, right? It goes, somebody told you and you give him credit the first time, the second time, as they've said, and then by the time you do it the third time, as I've always said,
right.
That there's two things we control, is our attitude and our effort. And I felt like Walt Disney was able to use his attitude and effort to create the success of Disney. It's even when the strike happened and he was so hurt, and now he starts to become a little bit more of an evangelist, right? Because he pulls himself away of being so close to the people, but he's going to evangelize to get money and his creations and move in that way. He moves out of that whole thing. There is still, I know that it may be difficult, but there's still a level of optimism inside of him that says, there's something bigger I need to do here, and we can do it. I just need to evangelize it. And and his effort never ceased. It just didn't stop. His effort was over the top. And as you alluded to, I mean, he had nervous breakdowns along the way.
He did, yeah.
And so, it's, I could hear people going, "Oh gosh, is this part of entrepreneurship?" I mean, what has your experience been? I mean, is this typical that we see really successful entrepreneurs go through those type of things where they're just so tied into themselves and their dream?
Hey, I think it is. And that's why I hope people read the book, one, to be aware of what happens as you build a successful company. I do a lot of coaching, and a lot of the entrepreneurs I coach, it ends up being more almost personal development, almost therapy in a way,
Yep.
Because people are dealing with stresses. I have one very dear friend who has a great travel agency, and she's now one of the top in the country. And the thing that keeps her up at night, the thing that really weighs on her shoulders, is all these people that now have jobs because of her company. She feels responsible for this company to do well, because her fear is that if it doesn't, these people she's provided for and gotten to know and care about won't have jobs. And so I coach her on the personal side of that. And we oftentimes talk about how actually the entrepreneur shapes the business, but the business also shapes the entrepreneur. And you will face challenges. One, as you get more successful, as you get bigger, there's a lot of growth that comes in there. And I think being aware of that will make it easier. One, hopefully you go and get help, whether it's a coach or a therapist or somebody who's a mentor that can guide you through those places, because it's hard to find that, right? I mean, people who haven't experienced it or who are not experts on it, they really don't understand it. And it only comes a lot of times with success. There is a price to success. There's even a loneliness that comes with success, because everyone who comes to you now you have to wonder what their motivation is, right? I mean, you're a target for not necessarily bad intentions, but it's just a lot more responsibility and stress. And those are things, hardships, when the times do get hard, How do you work through them? And you're right about Walt. The thing about Walt was every time he went through something hard, he moved forward. And a lot of the people around him said, sometimes he would even shake it off and say, that happened. We got to move on. What's next?
Right. Yeah. And listen, I do a lot of coaching as well. And I find, by the way, it comes to the exact same thing you probably I deal with, is that what ends up happening is not so much, it winds up being, yeah, we're dealing with the business, but it's really dealing with what with the executive I'm dealing with is going through. And literally, yes, it's literally becomes a therapy session of helping them navigate their own feelings and thoughts and their own, the worries that they have, and helping them navigate them and reassuring them and that, this is all part of the process, and that, how do we manage that? Management is just a really key thing. And my wife, who is successful and owns her own company, deals with the exact same issue all the time. The bigger she's gotten, the more she goes, these people are counting on me.
Right.
This is if I don't make it rain, these people are going to lose their jobs, and they need these jobs.
Yep. Exactly.
And I listen. Every successful executive I've ever coached has dealt with the exact same thing. I don't care. They deal with exactly the same thing, and so I'm glad that it's not an observation that's solely on me. I'm glad that another professional coach has the same issues. Do you realize that we've been on for an hour?
Is it really? Wow, it's been a great talk.
This is so much fun. I always tell. I generally like to tell my guests that when you are on this show, it's as if we're two authors who are friends, and there's a party going on at my house, and we're in the kitchen, drinking our favorite beverage, and there's some Italian meats and cheeses along the side, and everybody's just listening in. And that is exactly how it has felt for the last 57 minutes that we've been able to do this. So this has been fun. I wanted to talk about Gallup StrengthsFinder because I'm a firm believer as a coach in Gallup StrengthsFinder. My number one is I'm a learner, and
me too. I'm a learner as well. Number one.
Yeah, I'm an activator second, and then I'm a competitor, and connectedness is in there. So as well. So I wanted to talk about that. I don't think we're gonna be able to get to that because we're so short of time. So what I do. And I do believe in that. By the way, I believe in doing the StrengthsFinder, and I just think you can learn so much about your strengths. And Gallup has a number of other tools that I believe can help your company, and you should get professional help to deal with that, because it's certainly, Rob talks about that certainly in the second half of the book. I do want to ask you though, before you go, I ask every guest who is now a friend to leave our listeners with a new direction. And here's the thing: the show is called A New Direction because we try to help people in their life or their career or their business. So based on this book, Entrepreneurship: The Disney Way, and you, co-author Dr. Michael Goldsby, if you could leave the listeners with a new direction based on your book, what would that be?
I would say that it's taking those big dreams and then finding those first actionable steps to get them going. Because I think once you start doing anything that moves you towards that dream, it starts becoming more of a reality, and then something clicks psychologically to where you're compelled to keep moving forward to that. So there's the idea side, and the idea will evolve over time. But there's also the get started side, knowing it's not perfect, knowing you may not have it fully figured out. But when you just take those first easy steps, the easiest step you can take to get started on the project, think about what can I do right now, that one easy step to get started. That's what's going to make it happen quicker than anything.
It sounds like something Walt Disney would say, right?
Totally.
The best way is what? Take action. What did he say?
He said, the best way to get started doing something is quit talking and start doing.
I think that's what you just said.
I think it is. You're right. It's burned into my subconscious now.
That's so true. Can you stay with me for a few minutes?
Okay.
As I close the show?
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Michael Goldsby, the book Entrepreneurship: The Disney Way. Great book. Did you have some fun? Did you learn something from Walt Disney in Michael's description? And what a great it's a great book. It's a great read. We didn't even talk about the second half of the book and what Disney is doing today in their trials and travails. But I tell you, you can buy this book. It's just tremendous, and it's inspiring. It really is. I found this book to be such an inspirational read, and also helped me not only as a business person but also helped me as a coach. So tremendous read, folks. That's the show. This is called A New Direction because we try to help you find a new direction in your life, your career, and your business. And Michael Goldsby fulfilled every one of those today, and I am so grateful to him. Remember, folks, be inspired, because when you're inspired, you can inspire other people. And when we do that, we can make this world an amazing place. So until next week, I will see you later. Ciao, everybody.
When you lost your confidence and the answers don't make sense, got to keep your hope alive. You got to know you can survive. This is your time to fly. A new direction, a brand new day. A new direction, things are gonna change. You can find the strength to go a different way, yeah. The time has come. Your dreams will take you places you have never been before. Find your passion, find your strength.